Today we're going to speak briefly about the Sunnah prayers, and just so everybody understands, the Sunnah prayers, these are the prayers that we do not have to perform. You are not obligated to pray any prayers except for Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha. Those are the prayers that we are obligated to pray. Allah is going to ask us about those. He's not going to ask us about any voluntary prayers. The Sunnah prayers are the voluntary prayers, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would always perform them at home. He would always perform his sunnah or voluntary prayers at home. And this is something that you men need to ponder. For the men, your obligatory prayers should be prayed at the mosque, but your sunnah prayer should be at home. Listen to what Ibn Umar, who was the son of Umar, had to say. He said, I have continued to observe the performance of 10 rakaats, which I learnt from the Prophet of Allah. And those 10 rakaats are 2 voluntary rakaats before Dhuhr and 2 voluntary rakaats after it. That's the sunnah prayer for Dhuhr. Or you can perform 4 sunnah rakats before Dhuhr and 2 afterwards. So that's why some hadiths say 10 and some say 12. Because sometimes the Prophet would do 4 rakats before Dhuhr and sometimes he would just do 2. So those are the voluntary prayers of Dhuhr. Okay? And also 2 rakats after Maghrib. These are the sunnah prayers or the voluntary prayers of Maghrib. 2 rakats afterwards. And also 2 rakats after Isha. That is the voluntary prayer of Isha. And 2 rakats before Fajr. So those are the sunnah prayers. And again, guys, these prayers, you do not have to do them at all. I repeat, you do not have to ever make these prayers, but we do it for the reward. The Prophet taught us, if you want extra blessings, then you can perform the sunnah prayers, but you're not obligated to. And also, guys, say for example, it's part of your regular routine to perform the sunnah prayers and you happen to miss one because something happened, then you can make up for them at a later time. For example, say you always do the 2 rakats after Dhuhr, but something happened and you couldn't perform them, so you can make them up later on in the day after Isha or something. Everybody understand? Because they are voluntary prayers. In regards to the 2 rakats before Maghrib, because by the way, guys, sometimes you're going to hear people mention 2 rakats before Maghrib. Listen to what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. Pray 2 rakats before Maghrib for whoever wants to, because he did not want the people to think that it was an obligation. Okay, so again, this just goes to show that these are voluntary prayers, and the Prophet said you can pray them, if you want to, because it's not an obligation. Okay, so those are the sunnah prayers. And again, the sunnah prayers are often prayed at home, because the Prophet told us to not make your homes become like a graveyard. You want to fill your home with worship. Also, the sunnah prayers, this is a good time to pray with your wife and children too, to teach your wives and to teach your kids the correct way to pray. So the Prophet would perform the sunnah prayers, and he'd often perform them with the children in his family or with his wives. Does everybody understand? Okay. And again, when we talk about Sunnah prayers, this also includes the night prayer. The night prayer. The night prayer is not an obligation. It is a voluntary prayer. And the night prayer is performed anytime after Isha. You can perform it anytime after Isha up until Fajr. Okay? And you hear people use words like Taraweeh, Tahajjud, Qiyam al-Layl. All of these are terms referring to the night prayer, praying after Isha. The Prophet Muhammad used to pray the night prayer every night, but it is not an obligation upon us. You can pray it if you want to, you don't have to. Okay? And this hadith here is telling you how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would perform it. He would say, "None has the right to be worshipped except you, Allah. I seek forgiveness from you for my sins, and I ask you for your mercy. O Allah, increase me in knowledge, and do not make my heart deviate from the truth after you have guided me, and grant me mercy from you. Oh Allah, you are the bestower." So again, you know, the Prophet would, whenever he would wake up from a night's sleep, he would recite this dua right here too. This is a dua. And by the way, guys, this dua, you don't have to perform the night prayer to recite it. It's a dua. You can say this dua anytime you want to. This is a dua that I say all the time. I say this all the time, okay? Because I don't want my heart to deviate from the truth. Okay, and I do want Allah to increase me in knowledge. So you can recite this dua anytime you want to. The Prophet used to recite it whenever he woke up from his sleep at night. He would also sometimes recite it during his night prayer, but you can recite it as a simple dua anytime you want to. Also, guys, if the Prophet woke up from sleep during the daytime, there are certain supplications he would say too. For example, he used to sometimes say, "All praise and thanks be to Allah who has brought us to life after he made us die, and to him will be the resurrection." This is another voluntary dua that you can recite anytime during the day or the night too. But when the Prophet would wake up from sleep in the daytime, he would recite this dua, and then the first thing he would do is go clean his teeth. The Prophet used to go and brush his teeth. And then he would recite 10 verses from Surah Al-Imran. Okay, these are just things that he used to do. Do we have to do them? No. You don't have to do these things, but again, this shows insight into how the Prophet lived his life, and also is something good that you might want to adopt. Okay, so the Prophet, whenever he would wake up in the daytime, he would recite this dua praising Allah. Then he would go and brush his teeth. And then he would recite some verses from the Quran, Surah Al-Imran. And then he would make wudu, and he would perform 2 light rakaats. And this is something, again, this is a voluntary prayer. You don't have to do this. But it's something that the Prophet encouraged us to do, and you can do it. Okay, I try to do this sometimes. If I wake up, I try to get up and praise Allah, and I go make wudu, and I try to do 2 rakats. I try to do this too. I'm not able to do it all the time, but I try to incorporate this into my life, because it's something that the Prophet encouraged us to do. This is a voluntary little prayer. Anytime you wake up. Okay? And also, guys, when we talk about how the Prophet used to pray during the nighttime, prayers at night fall in 3 different categories. Standing, which is the most common, sitting and reciting in a sitting position, and then when only a little remained of his recitation, he would stand and bow in a standing position. It has not been reported from him that he would perform Qunoot in the Witr. Instead, there is a hadith from Ibn Majah which states Umar used to do that, but there is nothing from the Prophet. And I want you guys to understand that I get a lot of emails from brothers asking me, should the dua Qunoot be performed during the night prayer? The Prophet didn't do that. The Prophet did not perform the dua Qunoot during the night prayer. Umar used to do that, but the Prophet Muhammad did not do that. Okay? But if you want to do that, I guess you could, but the Prophet didn't do that. And also, guys, another Sunnah prayer. Not only did the Prophet perform the Sunnahs of Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha, not only did he perform the night prayer, and not only did he pray 2 rakaats during the day whenever he woke up, but also he used to perform prayer whenever the sun eclipsed. Whenever the sun eclipsed. When the sun would eclipse, the Prophet would hurry to the masjid, and he would lead the people in a 2 rakat prayer. He would recite out loud the Fatiha, and then he would recite another surah of the Quran. And it was during this prayer that he was allowed to look inside paradise and hell. And this is when he saw people being punished in hell. He saw a woman who was being punished in hell because she kept a cat locked up that died. He also saw Amir ibn Malik being dragged around in the hellfire. So again, you know, whenever there is a solar eclipse, what you should do is perform a 2 rakat prayer. That's another Sunnah prayer. Again, you don't have to do it, but it's a Sunnah. So thus today we learn about the Sunnah prayers. The Sunnahs of Fajr, 2 rakats before. The Sunnahs of Dhuhr, either 2 or 4 before and 2 after. There are no Sunnahs of Asr. The Sunnahs of Maghrib, 2 after. And also the Sunnahs of Isha, 2 after. Followed by, you can perform the night prayer anytime up until Fajr. Also remember, if you want to, if you are sleeping during the day and you happen to wake up praising Allah, and then go make wudu and make 2 rakats. This is something the Prophet used to do. And if the Prophet woke up during the middle of the night, he'd also make dua, praising and glory.